Hello and welcome. I'm Denis, Senior Vice President for EMEA at WNS Denali, and I'm joined here today with Alpar Kamber, who is Business Unit Leader for Procurement Services. In today's episode of Ask Alpar, we're going to dive into the idea of prioritization, particularly for procurement leaders. So Alpar, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Denis, for having me.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure. So WNS Denali just published this benchmark study with some great key insights for procurement leaders. An interesting theme was that for many procurement organizations, there are many burning platforms. What do you think?
Well, yes, sounds familiar. I mean, look, I think when you think about procurement, I see two types of work or requirements, right? One is procurement needs to respond to different things that are thrown at them. That is the reactive part of procurement, that you have to be able to react very quickly. And you also have a proactive pursuit of going after initiatives that would create value for the organization. And I think especially in the last 12 months with the pandemic and during COVID specifically, we've seen the reactive part to go up quite a bit because of firefighting, needing to address supply chain issues or having to drive further cost out or trying to preserve some cash. So the amount of procurement interaction and focus have gone up. And that certainly call for a need to prioritize and need to be able to focus on what needs to happen first.
Okay, and really, as you said, we know that not everything can be a top priority. And as you said, we need to focus. So, and we talk about it quite a bit internally, also with the leadership and with our clients. So, what is your advice to prioritize?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a tough one. I was just reading an article by Warren Buffett giving some key lessons learned or key lessons to business people. And one of the things caught me, and he said, it's about knowing when to say no to something and saying no to a lot of things, which in theory, what it means is knowing what to focus on. And there's a lot of things that is going to be thrown at us in procurement. And as procurement leaders, one needs to know which ones to say no to and which ones to go after. Now, how do we prioritize that? The way I look at it, and I do this for our business as well with our teams, is to focus on, some, first of all, club initiatives or asks by short-term, mid-term, long-term, and then also put them on a 2x2, saying the value that it's going to create for the organization, as well as the difficulty, the complexity of getting it done. So when you have that 2x2, that tells you, I'm going to do something that is not as complex, but it's going to create a lot of value. So that tells you where to focus on. And then on top of that, as I said, look at things, don't just focus on things that are in the short term. You also start working on things that will be mid to long term. When you have that time horizon, along with the value complexity matrix, you can prioritize. Now, it's easier said than done, obviously, because there will be things that are thrown at you that you have to respond. You have to prioritize because it's just the nature of the business. For them, it's very difficult to say no to. And unless, if you say no to that, procurement may lose reputation and credibility. So obviously those needs to be addressed first, and you need to have an operating model that responds to that. And the proactive pieces that you want to go after, the framework that I just mentioned would be very, very useful.
Okay, so I mean, knowing to say no indeed can be difficult, but I think is an important takeaway, and I find the insight also in positioning the priorities on the horizon and not trying to achieve everything right away. I think is a good takeaway. So, where would you say are the biggest gaps in procurement today to help those positioning those priorities?
Yeah, that's a big question, and I don't think there's one answer to that, right? Gaps really depend on, and I see this every day when talking to various procurement organizations globally in the world, that everybody has, depending on their maturity, because you're on a journey with procurement. There's no constant, position that you want to get to. Is always an evolving and improving ecosystem when you think about the procurement as an ecosystem. And the gaps really depend on your level of maturity and the industry that you operate in and what priorities that are put in front of you, right? So, but if I were to generalize from a prioritization perspective, most procurement organizations prioritize their talent, either from a capacity perspective, ability to execute, or from a skill set perspective, augment their skill set to be more strategic, to further align with the lines of business. And then the second area is the operating model. How do you get work done? How do you create an operating model that deals with the reactive side of procurement, but also comes up with proactive initiatives that adds value? And then the third part is digitization, is ability to use technology, software, and data where you can, so that you're driving efficiencies and effectiveness in your operating model, how you get things done. So I would say those are the three things that often needs to get prioritized as a gap.
Great, thank you. And I love the image of the ecosystem. So it's been a great session, Alpar. Thank you for sharing your insights.
Thank you, Denis, for having me.